Hey, Nate. Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Well, welcome all to the Planning Board meeting of May 10th, 2022. So since we're conducting this virtually, we will begin by doing a roll call of our members. So I will go around. Linda.
Here.
Kate. Kate's here.
Here.
Kristen.
Here.
And Nathan.
Here.
And I'm Burton, and I am here, so we have a quorum for the evening. We'll jump into our first order of business, which is to open a public hearing or to continue the public hearing of the definitive subdivision plan application of AWMW LLC for the improvement of Sunnyside Lane and the creation of 4 new lots, parcels 2088, 2089, 2092, 2092-1, and 2093. Mr. White, shall I turn it over to you if you want to update us on where things stand, or Elizabeth, is there any points you want to make as we continue this?
Oh no, I'll let
Okay.
Mark go first. I have a couple of things to add.
So
From
for the
this
record,
afternoon.
Mark White from 233 Independence Road in AWMW. And with me tonight is Paul Kirchner from Stampsey and McNary. Molly was unable to attend. I was just in panic mode a minute ago as I couldn't log on, and somehow you all just appeared, which is good. So anyway, since our last meeting, we did meet with the Public Works Commission, and they agreed to continue maintaining the roadway as long as all the residents signed a hold harmless agreement and kept the road well maintained. I got in contact with Steve Dorkerin from the engineering department, and he forwarded to me the hold harmless agreement the town has used in the past. I will be signing that on behalf of all the lots in which I own, and I disseminated that to all the existing residents, and they'll be signing it. I let them know that as a condition of having the road maintained, that this would need to be signed. The revised plans also show 18 feet of paving. The engineering department has come back and requested that we put 2-foot gravel shoulders on either side of that, so that the travel way will actually be 22 feet wide. We're okay with that, and we do need to make some minor adjustments to the drainage calculations, which are in process of being done. So we don't foresee any issues with that whatsoever, and we'll be submitting the new cross-section with the 2-foot shoulders and the drainage calcs with the revised plans. Something else that Justin pointed out is in the low point of the roadway, he'd like to see a catch basin in the paving so that in the winter, if the snowbanks ever got real high or icy, there wouldn't be a ponding effect, that catch basin would collect all the water and get it into the drainage system. Once again, we don't have an issue with that, and we'll be submitting that with the revised plans. I understand that the community safety officer went out and decided that there's no street light needed at the intersection of Losbrook and Sunnyside Lane. The one issue one of the issues that we're still working with the engineering department on is the site distance. This morning, I met with Justin Richardson from the engineering department, as well as Eric Shaw from Public Works, who's the assistant tree warden. He took a quick look at that tree that's at the intersection, and based upon his quick analysis, thought it was a healthy tree. There were some minor things with it, but in whole, he thought it was a healthy tree. So what we were proposing was to put a stop line at the intersection of Losbrook and Sunnyside, as well as a stop sign, so that people would know, obviously, they needed to stop before they headed out there. Steve Dorkerin, I believe, went out to the site later in the day and is not sure he wants that as the solution. So the two options would be for that stop line and the stop sign, or removal of that tree. And that's something that we plan to work with the engineering department on. to
So
resolve?
this is where I'm going to jump in. It has to do with the sight distance at the intersection. And I did speak with Justin this afternoon, and it's not necessarily what the engineering decides. It's also if the applicant would like to request a waiver to that stop sign, along with these two items, including a waiver to the site distance, along with these two additional items of the new stop line, which is currently not there, and the stop sign at that stop line. This is a 28-inch oak. It's probably at least 100 years old. And I'm not aware, and I'll confirm with the community safety officer, have him look again, but he did not bring up any accident issues at this location. The project will be adding 4 new homes, but whether that warrants the removal of an oak tree of that size, at that age, I told Justin that I would bring it back to the board tonight for your basically your discussion, and whether Mark wanted to request a waiver to that site distance requirement, along with adding the stop line and stop sign.
I've been pulling out of the site probably 3 or 4 times each day the last year. And I know it's probably doesn't carry a lot of weight, but I haven't had any issues with any sort of oncoming traffic or people in the sidewalk. It's, you pull up and you stop and you look out, and there's, if you pull forward enough, there's plenty of sight distance without being out in the roadway. But like I say, I know my opinion probably doesn't carry a lot of weight.
So my other suggestion is the board doesn't have to have a conversation about this tonight. There are some, additional changes, and continue this out. There's one other issue I want to discuss, but continue this for 2 weeks for a direction and decision from the board. But between that time period, Mark can have Molly or Paul go to the site and just paint where that stop line and stop sign would be located, and the board members can just drive out there and take a look. And this time, I mean, you've all been out there when you went to look at the pavement width markings, but now you can specifically go out there, see where the stop line and stop sign would be located in relationship to that tree, and then have a conversation about it in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Could I just add to that?
Okay.
We did look at that this morning, and if you put the stop line where it's theoretically supposed to be, that tree is in the way, but we could put that in a manner where you stop and then you creep forward a little bit and you have plenty of sight distance. So I don't mind painting that out where it would be, but I think if you stop where that stop line theoretically should be, you're going to be looking at the tree. You've got to, the stop line would be about 14 feet in on Sunnyside Lane. So you have 14 feet to nose out from that stop line.
Linda, did you want to make?
I just had a couple questions, and that is, I know you said it was a 100-year-old tree. Is it likely to get any larger, 1? And 2, I know if we go out, it won't be in full foliage. And is there any way to imagine that? And or is there any way that you could trim the tree without damaging it so it would improve the, the visibility?
It's not really the branches. I mean, it's 28 inches.
The branches are probably 20 feet above the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the sheer diameter of the tree.
So
didn't remember
if-
it off.
But so
Okay.
to Mark's point, where the stop line would be
Mm-hmm.
is also, there's a sidewalk that goes across there. So people are going to be pulling forward from that stop line, but not immediately pulling out into the road. And what I can do is, maybe this will help. Give me one. So does everybody see the plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Mark or Paul, correct me. I mean, I think the
Right
stop
about when you-
line
Exactly. Yes.
goes right about here, but then here's, there is a sidewalk that goes down this side of Losbrook Road. So you would be pulling forward more slowly because of the sidewalk, and then, proceeding into the intersection. Can everybody see that? Should I blow it up?
We can see it. Elizabeth, could I just ask for a little background? Because I don't think this was called out as an issue in the memo. So is this because Sunnyside Lane is being improved, they've got to put down markings, Mark would need to put down markings, and there's certain specifications where those markings need to be from the intersection. And they've identified that stop line would be adjacent to one of these trees. And so you wouldn't be able to see down the road. Is that?
Correct. I think, correct. Because
Okay.
where you are from the stop line, you're supposed to be able to see, in both directions for a certain number of feet.
Okay. And are those trees on public or private property?
Public.
They are. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
They're public shade trees.
mhm.
Does anybody, when they drove down there to look at the paving, do any of you recall having an issue, having a sight distance concern pulling out of there?
No, but I was looking around for where the stoplights were. I mean, the street light was. That's where my attention was. But listen, I mean, those are beautiful. It's on either side too, right? Is it only in one direction? But I can see that there's an oak tree on either side of that.
The one on the westerly side or the right side as you're pulling out has been cut down. It was there years ago, but the stump's still there.
Oh,
But,
really? Okay,
but the tree on the left, on the easterly side, is still there.
I see.
And then there's another
it-
one down probably 30 or 40 feet.
Westerly.
Easterly.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't cut down. It came down in a storm a year and a half ago.
That one right at the end, Sue, on the end of Sunnyside?
Yes, Sioux Falls 19 Sunnyside Lane to the west side where the stump is.
What I was going to say is, I mean, to that exact point, Sue, thanks for pointing that out, is that, I mean, I know that there's been that tree, and I believe maybe a tree or two others that have come down on that street in storms recently, and it would be a terrible shame, I think, to cut down another beautiful mature street tree. And I would be very willing, I mean, I don't know what the zoning relief or waiver is that the board would be granting here, but any solution that comes up with a way to adjust where the line is, as long as a public safety officer says it's fine, is certainly fine by me. Does anybody else on the board disagree?
I agree.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you.
And not to mention the expense and all that with the removal. So Elizabeth, I guess the outcome on this is just that what the public safety officer needs to determine whether putting the line in a slightly non-standard place is okay, and in which case we're providing a waiver from that requirement of where the line would need to be placed.
So it would actually be the engineering, the town engineer.
Sorry. Yeah.
So what I will do is I will speak with him tomorrow. And then Mark, when you're resubmittal, if you want to include a request for that waiver and along with the stop line, stop sign. But before you do that, I can touch base with the town engineer and see if that line can be modified. But If not, I will also check with the community safety officer to, confirm that, it's not an accident riddled intersection.
Thanks.
And then have all of that ready for your meeting in 2 weeks.
That sounds good. So, I mean, Mark, assuming that Mr. White, assuming that the town staff is good with that solution, I think this board seems to be.
We would be, yes.
So Elizabeth, just a couple other, or actually, I'm sorry, Mr. White, were there any other comments you wanted to make?
Yeah, so the existing trails have been located on the plan, and as we represented in previous meetings, there would be pedestrian easements along the unknown way, and then also over the lot 7A that I currently own. That's going to be deeded to the owners of 49 Pond Street, but in their P&S, and they've been made aware that that trail that's currently going through there will be open to the public. Both trails are already extremely well maintained or cleared, so there aren't any trees or brush that need to be removed. One thing that the NRC had requested was for that comment to be removed from the plan within their jurisdiction. So I know the planning board has requested that note to remain in. So we could always move that to areas outside of their jurisdiction. But once again, the trails, without anybody really, other than the residents of Sunnyside using them, are extremely well maintained or manicured, I guess you'd call them.
And I'm sorry, the comment, Elizabeth, could you clarify which comment that is that we would be keeping in the approval, the requirement?
So the original comment about maintaining access to those trails was from the Natural Resources Director. And I think that was the original reason that Mark put that note on, but now that it's gone a little further with the Natural Resources Commission and they want the note removed, I don't have an issue with the note being removed, and I can bring that up just so you can. It's this note right in the middle, right here.
Oh, okay. So it's not removing any obligation to maintain the trail. This is talking about clearing the brush as a condition precedent.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't have any concern with that.
And Mr. White, I did go down there and trespass on your land and check out those trails, so I can attest to the fact that they are relatively.
Yeah, they're very well maintained.
So my question, so I have two things, Mark, it's this lot right here that will have.
I'm not.
Well, then you stop sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. This lot right here.
Correct. 49 Pond Street.
So, so this trail doesn't go onto that lot. Is
Correct.
it? So what?
But there's,
In their deed?
I'm sorry.
What will be included in their deed?
There'll be a note, something in the deed stating that the public will have pedestrian access to both of those trails.
Okay. But they
Because
don't.
in theory, they own between 49 Pond and the parcel 7A because they own the center line of road. So there will be language in their deed that there will be a pedestrian easement to both trails.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm not sure that it's legally if it's necessary since the town owns these two lots down here. So.
Well, I think it is because if you were coming from Sunnyside, and I'm pointing at the things, but in theory, 49 Pond is under the same ownership as that 49 Pond, as well as the lot on the other side. So therefore, they own to the center line of the unnamed way. So the town would have access to the lot to the left of 7A and to the lots to the right. So,
Right. Well, it's not a discussion we have to have if you're
Yeah.
going to provide that language.
yeah, and
That's
the homeowners are aware of it and
okay.
everybody's good.
Okay, so and now I was maybe a step behind you, Elizabeth. So what we're talking about is assuring access down the middle of the unnamed way to get from Sunnyside to that trail that's at the end of Pond.
Correct.
Okay, and from a legal perspective, is putting a notation in a deed that is not granting an easement or right to a other party that holds that right independent of the deed, an effective way to do that?
So this is from a legal perspective where the town owns this lot right here,
Mhm.
and the town owns, that's great. Mark, you own this lot,
Correct.
the town owns this one, and the town owns these.
Mhm.
So technically, the town as the owner has rights of, ingress and egress.
Yep.
So I'm not necessarily sure whether, the town actually needs an actual easement, but if there is a note and a condition in the subdivision
There you
on
go.
the plan and in the decision regarding,
There,
as a
okay.
condition of this of this plan and this decision, there's, public access is being granted.
Yeah.
And in 5B and 49 Pond Street, that's also included in the deed as
Yeah.
reference to, the subdivision plan, and allowing, public access to those trails.
I think
That's-
you've answered my question, which is it goes in the subdivision plan approval. And that's the ultimate, a notation in the title that gets to it. I just worry about a deed, a individual parcel deed, which can get,
Yeah, it would be
rewritten.
on the plan, in the decision, and then in those deeds.
Okay. So that works for me.
Okay, the last thing, what Mark and his team will need to do between now and in 2 weeks, and it may not necessarily, is to reach out to the CMLP engineering. And I got a very apologetic email and phone call that I'm extending to Mark and his team. They've been fairly overwhelmed, and he apologizes that he missed this, but the location of the electrical conduit on the swale side of the property is going to have to be evaluated. Right here, it's showing a handhold, which is in the middle of the swale, which is designed to fill up with water until you get to the rim of the catch basins. And engineering cannot have an electrical handhold in the swale. And they'll also just need to work on how each one of these underground lines are going to be coming across and going across this swale. So if Mark and his team can contact CMLP Engineering, you can start with Jeff Cosgrove and get that conversation going. He said he'll be as responsive as he can, because I told him this was coming back in 2 weeks with a decision. So
Elizabeth, speaking of CMLP, have they weighed in on the advisability of undergrounding the line from between 19 and Losbrook?
They are still in conversations with the CMLP director. I think normally their indication is when somebody does a roadway improvement such as this, to not go to that extent, because it's usually not a complete improvement such as this. But they definitely, as part of this conversation, want to talk to Mark about the possibility when the road is dug up, that CMLP having the opportunity to go in and at least lay conduit.
Right.
And put in, handholds in appropriate locations. Again, it's going to be where those handholds can go, such as with 19 Sunnyside. If they do lay conduit, they might be able to, depending on where the current service is, be able to put a handhold before the swale, or maybe put it, work with the property owner, just if it's on the other side of the property line, get an easement just to put the handhold on the opposite side of the swale, which that would be the same case over here. On the opposite side of the swale, they could have a small easement in the corner to put the handhold on that side. So there's definitely options to make this work. It just needs it
They're
needs just one more conversation to figure out how to lay that out.
I don't see any issues making that work. I mean, there are some minor adjustments, but nothing we haven't done in the past. So it's,
That would be great to see a road like Sunnyside get undergrounded, because it's probably somewhere in the bottom 25% of roads in the priority townwide to be undergrounded.
the hardest part is not the Concord municipal light, it's just the other utilities.
Yeah, right.
It's just Concord municipal light, such a pleasure to work with.
It's
And I'll
gross.
stop there.
Very, very good. Well, I appreciate the efforts there. Thank you, Elizabeth.
And the last thing I had was just that the homeowner documents would be updated and submitted to town staff, showing that the private road would be the responsibility of the homeowners for maintenance, and also the stormwater drainage maintenance.
When you say other private road, the unnamed private way,
I'm sorry?
you're referring to the unnamed private way. You're not talking about Sunnyside, which will be maintained by the town with a hold harmless agreement.
They'll be plowing the roadway, but the maintenance of the road will be the residents' responsibility.
Okay, I got it. Thanks. Okay. Sue, I see you've had your hand up. You still have a question?
Couple of things. First, I wanted to comment that in that storm a year and a half ago, we lost something like 20 large trees up and down Lawsbrook in the general area, including a tree reputed to be 250 years old. And so I, as a resident, am very interested in maintaining alive that nice large oak at the corner. Second, I was reading over some of the documents for tonight's meeting, and I realized I'm still kind of unclear on what part of the homeowners agreement will apply to just the new houses versus with respect to the stormwater maintenance, and what to the all the residents with respect to the street. But I'm sure that Mark will come back to us with a document in a timely fashion that will clarify things. And third, we've talked, the applicants talked about how 49 Pond will have something in their deed about maintenance to the public pathway. But I wonder if there needs to be something in the deed for 5B to say that the public can come across the half of the unnamed way to get in from Sunnyside to the path, or whether we should just count that that will get maintained along the town property that fronts the pond. So it's just not necessary at all. It just occurred to me to ask.
Mark, Mr. White, if you'd like.
So it's just I will come back with a formal document, but simply the existing homeowners are only going to be responsible for the upkeeping of the roadway, making sure that the travelway is in good condition. All these stormwater cleaning of the basins, the infiltration basins will all be the responsibility of the new homeowners. In terms of, I will make the homeowners of 5B aware of the trail easement, but keep in mind that adjacent to 5B is a parcel owned by the town, and they have the, they would own halfway to the intersection, so you'd already have a legal right to pass over that.
All right, with that, Elizabeth, maybe if I just quickly run through the memo to make sure we've covered everything. With respect, I think that the first thing that looked like it needed any further discussion, there was the engineering comments. We've talked about that, right? That they've not they continue to have issues that they're working through, right? We've received the sign off from the water and sewer, right? But that came in this afternoon. Is that correct?
Yes, the Public Works Commission has granted a water main extension to loop the water main from Pond Street down the unnamed road to
Right.
Sunnyside.
Okay. Then we've talked about CMLP. We did receive the comment letter from the Natural Resources Director with a few conditions that she was asking for. Mr. White, did you have any issues with that letter, or presuming you've
No.
seen it?
I did not. I'm all set with that.
You're all set. Okay, great. So Elizabeth, I think unless anybody else on the planning board objects, I think that would be good to reflect those requests in the approval. Then we've got the comments from the sustainability director. And I guess the last thing was on the question of the fill. Is that simply whether is it 1,800 cubic yards coming off one lot, or was it?
We have it broken down into, we broke it down to all the roadway and then the 4 additional lots, and neither of those exceed 1,000 yards.
Okay, so Elizabeth, that meets your satisfaction?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, once I get the information.
Once you get the information. All right. So with that, I think we've hit all the points. Let me pause and do a check with the board. Does anybody on the board have any further questions, comments, concerns?
No, I'm okay so far.
Very good. So then with that, I think that our next item would be to continue if the applicant would like continue the public hearing to our next meeting in 2 weeks from now, which is, what is that, May 22nd?
It's May 24th.
The 24th. At 7 p.m.
Yes.
Mr. White.
As a point of order, do you have to ask if there's any public comment?
It's a good. I don't know whether we have to, but it's a good reminder. Do we have any public comment on this? We've been sort of taking it a little bit as we go along. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Scott Richardson, 260 Elsinore Street.
Mr. Richardson.
Just
Thank you.
thanks a lot for honoring the importance of that tree. I was just thinking that even if the tree were not attractive, even if the tree were not 100 years old, even if the tree were 20 or 15 or 10 inches round, or if it was 30 inches round and whatever, as long as it's not a nuisance to the public from a safety perspective, even if it's an ugly tree, it's still serving a role in sequestering carbon, much more than a stump does. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you for that
Yeah,
comment.
so that's the discussion the board will have to have as far as it being a requested waiver, because the town engineer has identified it as a safety issue. So that is the discussion and the balance that the board will have to have.
Hopefully, considering that the town planted it there at the end of the street at some point in time, presumably, and that it's existed there for, it would look like many decades, that they can come to find assurances that it's not too big of a risk.
But at Linda's question, I will speak to the tree warden about, and I can also speak to Delia about the size of the tree and its location, and you know, how much bigger it will get.
Seeing no other hands raised or anybody jumping up.
Can I just, I guess I don't think the board can waive a safety issue. So the question is whether the town engineer can see a way to re-engineer, like do something with the engineering of the intersection to not have to cut down the tree, right?
I think what
I'm not sure that's correct. No, there's many intersections that have sight distance issues, not just because of vegetation. It could be for a curve or a radius. And that's the conversation that I had with the assistant town engineer. And it's a project that's adding 4 homes. It's an existing condition. And it's that balance of does 4 homes now going to raise this existing condition to a point, given the number of trips coming in and out, 4 additional homes and the existing 4 homes that are there, that's not a significant level of service as far as the number of trips coming in and out. So I'll have the conversation with the town engineer again. But there's that balance as far as that level of safety. And I haven't spoken with the town engineer personally. I only spoke with the assistant town engineer. So
Okay.
that's a conversation I'll have to have between now and the 24th.
Yes, Linda.
I was just wondering, I know there's been construction ongoing already, but with the earth moving, whatever's going on and the construction of the homes, should you bifurcate that discussion to, should there be any special conditions with regard to the construction process and the traffic that might generate versus the ongoing traffic on a basis once the homes are existing? I would be interested if there was any thought about the construction process and safety.
So town staff has developed a standard condition for projects that prior to any earthwork, the applicant's required to submit a construction sequencing and safety plan. And that would be part of that safety plan. It may be temporary warning signs a certain distance in front of the intersection to, trucks entering and exiting, and different measures within the safety plan. If there's going to be a large number of trucks entering and exiting for maybe a delivery, or that they can coordinate with the police department to make sure that there's adequate, whether a police detail is needed, that's all discussed as part of the construction sequencing and safety plan that's required prior to any site work. And that plan's reviewed by myself, town engineer, fire department, and the community safety officer.
But that's separate from any conditions that we would consider.
No, that is
Or-
that is a standard condition for a
That will
project
go in
of
our
this
decision.
nature.
I see. Okay.
And maybe just Kristen, excuse me, Elizabeth, to follow up on Kate's comments as to whether we're providing a waiver to a safety issue. I think we take into consideration the input that we get from town engineering, but ultimately the approval of the subdivision plan and any waivers from the standard requirements, such as the distance from an intersection that the radius of an intersection, the sight lines and things. That approval falls to us to decide and weigh in. And I'm not suggesting we're saying we're going to override the safety concerns of the town engineering, but we take them into consideration in granting the approval with waivers or not.
Okay, from my perspective, on my vote, I would need the town engineer to say, I looked at it again, and actually I think it's fine considering the number of houses or whatever he says. Actually, I think it's fine to keep the tree. And then I would say, okay, I personally wouldn't approve with a safety concern about the sightlines coming out of the intersection. So I hope that's the result that we can get to with the town engineer.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll move to, I guess, go ahead and continue this to our next meeting on the 24th at 7 p.m. Elizabeth, you need anything else from me other than a vote to continue?
I need a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, I'll go around the room. I'll start with Kristen,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
thank you, Nathan,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Thank you for your input tonight, Mr. White, and we will see you on the 24th.
Thank you for that.
Okay. All right. That closes the public hearing and moves us to administrative items, which we have. So the first item would be the all-important post-town meeting discussion with respect to the agenda item said Article 32, specifically the direction we want to go with that. I'd also like to briefly discuss
33.
What
Did
did
it
I
say?
say?
Did I say 32? No,
Uh,
33.
I was thinking 32 because I was going to
Okay.
say I also want to discuss 32.
Okay.
Anyway, 32 and 33. So does anybody have any comments they want to start with? Well, I will kick it off. Just sort of don't want to come across as a scold here, but I will say that it was a surprise that we did not have more board members in attendance on the Sunday night. It directly impacted our ability as a board to be able to provide input on the amendment that was proposed and ultimately passed because we didn't have a quorum to provide a board position on. I know we've had a lot of absences lately and sometimes we feel a little disconnected because of Zoom, but I think people should ask themselves if they're not able to make it to town meeting. There's a reason we have seats up front. They can't make it to town meeting if they're missing meetings regularly. We're missing a couple of our members tonight, but one of them did reach out to us. They should consider whether the time commitment involved in the planning board is something that they have to give. That was unfortunate and commented upon, and I think it had a material impact on our ability to respond to that. And I think the people that did come on Monday, that was good. Even though we didn't have to deliberate on anything, like I said, there is a reason they give us a section up at the front, and in my prior experience, it's quite unusual for a member of the committee not to be at town meeting when planning board articles are considered.
Burton, I just want to say I apologize for I was there on Sunday and I didn't know where we were. And I've only been to the town meetings on the football field, and so I was looking for something analogous to that, and we weren't there. So I think if I would just advise you guys that we're even less aware of what we're supposed to be doing than you might think we are. So I just want you guys to know, I didn't mean not to sit with you on Sunday night. Just want to say that.
Okay, thank you. The other thing, the number of people
Wait,
from,
can I just make one other comment on that?
yeah, please.
So I'll just say that's the first day of town meeting that I've ever missed, but we were also told, I think I was talking to some other members, that the planning board articles were going to be reviewed and voted on Monday, that they were not going to be carried on Sunday. So when I had had other plans that I had to make for that Sunday, and when I heard neighbors come back saying planning board things were at the tail end of Sunday that they decided to move forward with those, I was kind of shocked to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was fully expecting as well, that they would be on Monday, but knowing that town meeting is one of the less predictable things that I participate in, it is what it is. We ended up being there. It was regrettable. Kristen was there, Linda was there, but like I said, we couldn't bring together a quorum. The other thing, a number of people from different boards have raised to me after the meeting, and again, not meaning to be a scold, but was the surprise at Kate, you're speaking out in opposition to the article, that's not something that typically happens. In fact, I've never seen it happen on the planning board. And people, people on different committees, select board, school committee, different committees have reached out to me. And when it was noted that the school committee elects at the beginning of their year, as they come together as a new committee, to have sort of a rules for the road, which is that once the board approves something, especially when it's a near majority, that the board will go to town meeting unified. Certainly, everybody gets to vote the way they want, but in support of the work of the board. And so that was something that was passed along. I will shortly be off the board, but I'd leave it to you to consider that. I would just note that it was a number of people were quite surprised by that. Does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked and offended that I wouldn't be able to say why I've been voting against the project for 2 years. I didn't say, like, I'm shocked by that. And I had 2 members of the finance committee come up to me afterwards and say, we really want to work with you to revise the proposal so that we think we can get this through next year. So I guess I also had people coming up to me afterwards from the finance committee. The entire committee voted against it. And so, but I didn't realize I've struggled all along with not being on the same page with you guys on this. And I also felt like it was a struggle both to not be on the same page and also to feel like I had, something to say that wasn't being appreciated. And that it was important for the folks in town to hear my perspective. So I guess I didn't, I'm surprised. And I also, at last year's town meeting, someone on the CMLP did speak out against something that the CMLP was supporting. And that was my basis for thinking it was okay for me to do that. So I guess I'm not,
So Kate, I'm absolutely not going to tell you you can't stand up at town meeting. That, first of all, it's not my job to do, and I have no basis or authority to do that. I'm
Okay.
suggesting it as creating a good working relationship amongst the board to be able to work together and have expectations. As something that may be considered. I will tell you that I was also surprised that I think that was the first time you'd raised this question of housing numbers.
it's not the first time. It's
Well,
not.
we-
It's
okay.
not like,
Okay.
So the purpose is to figure out how the board wants to move forward with whether to begin thinking of ways to restructure the bylaw, whether to just wait for a year and get input. I will tell you that I am trying to set up a meeting with the director at DHCD, who is managing the MBTA communities requirement, and have sent her the Thoreau Depot zoning bylaw and the design guidelines and the vision statement to get her feedback on moving forward. And so that's, I can tell you
Thank
some
you.
of the comments that were made at town meeting about having an impact assessment done and a traffic impact assessment done is something that the board will need to start as far as a budgeting process. That would be roughly about $150,000 to do those 2 type of studies on that scale.
Elizabeth, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get too far afield, but also I'm under the impression that you cannot bring a zoning article back to the floor in 2 successive town meetings. Is that correct or incorrect?
You cannot bring the same thing.
Okay.
It would have to be, revamped and reworked in some manner.
In some manner, is that changing the, making a small tweak here and there, or is that starting with a new proposal that is intended, that has the same, is guided by the same general principles?
I will get the actual statutory information for the board for the next meeting so that there's no miscommunication in the community, which seemed to be part of the problem with the Thoreau Depot anyways. so that people can have an understanding of what that threshold is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that that's where we would need to have that to continue the discussion, because if that something that's materially similar in terms of modifying zoning to increase the likelihood that there would be housing developed, then maybe this would be something that should be discussed in 2020, at the end of 2023, rather than planning for next year. Kristen, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, a few people reached out to me after town meeting to give feedback on their impression of the article, and it was very helpful. One person, a resident on Thoreau Street, who's been, very active and very thoughtful in how she provides comments, said that, she could boil it down to, building height, and that would have been a factor for her. Another older woman who was at town meeting said she, as someone new to the issue, just couldn't follow, and she thinks many people who are older at town meeting, because there were so many aspects of this of the zoning change that, when we tried to do a 6 or 7 minute presentation about it, and if people are hearing it for the first time, it was certainly overwhelming for her and older folks. That being said, one of the things that I think is missed at town meeting, if people are hearing things for the first time and then trying to make a vote, that's got to be very hard. We know that you can't really do that. And so, we had support from the select board, and we had, even the League of Women Voters, who, I know that's not a town body, but there was sustainability groups and affordable housing groups. And, there was a number of groups that weighed in, similar to the proposal that everybody kept saying was so fabulous that got voted, positively Aspet Bluff the day before. And somehow, that needs to count for helping the people to arrive if they at their vote. Like, they didn't arrive understanding the whole situation. They've got to be able to take into account that multiple groups have been at this for a long period of time and have arrived at that, and that should carry weight for people. But those were a couple of points that I thought it was appreciative that people kind of reached out. The other thing that I will say is, if, again, like Burton, I will not be on, but if we are tackling, substantial changes to the zoning, I think we always have to come out, say, what are our goals in changing this, and how well does the proposal meet these goals? Because it cannot be my personal view. It cannot be, somebody else's on the board view about whether this is the right thing to do or not. We're guided by the long range plan and other, data that we are given, and we have to do what's best collectively, with hopefully evaluating more than one thing. So, if it's not just open space, it's not just affordability, it's not just parking. We're weighing all of those things to come to the best proposal we can. And I think we have to be careful of scrapping something because of kind of personal issues in favor of kind of seeing the bigger picture. And I think we have to help the residents of Concord do the same. So
Thank you,
good
Kristen.
luck as you pick up and make a decision going forward.
Nathan, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, let me just put that down. Yeah, so I mean, obviously a little disappointed at the outcome, but not terribly surprised. I think if we're able to, well, I mean, if we could do it, I would say start with exactly what we left off and do it again next year, but we can't. So my suggestion, Elizabeth, if we can do this, is to break out the, if this would be enough of a threshold, is to break out the changing of the border of the Thoreau Depot Business District into its own article or amendment, and then run basically exactly the same thing with some changes based on feedback we get over the rest of the coming year into next year's town meeting. So I think, yeah, I totally agree with Kristen, your point that, we had a number of groups and committees that were supportive of the article, but they got kind of lost in everything else. And I think it would have been good to really put those out front, both in our own information everywhere that we possibly could, and make sure that they were stating that clearly at town meeting. And then the other thing is that, let's be frank. A lot of the opposition, I think we gave a little too much leeway in what we thought was misinformation, but it was pretty clear by the time we got to town meeting, and that green handout that doesn't need to be named where it came from was just straight up disinformation propaganda, driving one goal. Because there was plenty of information that was, or disinformation that was on that green paper that we had covered time and time again, and was just continuing on false information that clearly didn't help us and misled a number of people, I'm sure, at town meeting who may have had a cursory understanding of what the article was about. And, as Kristen was saying, they don't have enough time to really digest the full scope of the article. And so they end up voting it down for that reason. And I think we need to be willing to push back on that a little bit harder next year, both in the information that we make available and our willingness to engage with people that are continuing to do that.
Linda, you haven't spoken yet. Kristen, I see your hand, but I'm going to go to Linda.
I think we're being a little too pessimistic. I think we had 305 people or so who supported the proposal. And I think that it was unfortunate that we had the article heard on Monday night. I think things might have been different perhaps if it had been on Sunday and there had been a broader representation in Concord. So I think we have a lot to work with that's positive that we can leverage. The question I have is, do we need to also move forward in a parallel fashion with site plan review? Because I think a lot of the questions that people may have had might have been answered if we had the site plan review document that would answer some of their concerns and queries. And so that is a question I have of, if we do move forward, I think perhaps site plan review is something we should focus on intently as well.
Okay. Kristen.
2 points. I think there's, to Linda's point, optimism. There's a lot of people who expressed willingness to work on this, and I think there are opportunities to build more consensus. And I can see that you're already planning to do that, so that's important. And I think in building the consensus, that will hopefully, prevent any disinformation and things like that. But the second point is, I think, Sue is on the line and she's going to be joining as a member soon. So I'm sure she's sketching all these ideas, but I believe something that she might have mentioned, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, is, kind of a broader look at zoning reform, which we have talked about in the past. And it would be at great expense if we took a more comprehensive look. And I guess I'm wondering, does the business district, is it specific enough that it would not really be captured if there was like a 5-year plan to kind of do a more broad update to our zoning bylaws? Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm saying, like, if we didn't say we're going to change all of zoning next year, but we said, okay, we're going to, find a grant in the first year, we're going to do all this, and in about 5 years, I'm just estimating, we will hope to have kind of reformed our zoning so that we're not just piecemealing stuff from 1928. And so I didn't know if we took a broader view of kind of the larger changes that we wanted, if that would encompass the business district.
It almost sounds like a mini long-range plan. Are you talking about a more specifically, like, I mean, we've talked about doing form-based code in the past and revamping our zoning in that part. Are you talking about doing that kind of larger change and seeing how that would flow down to the
I think
special zoning
so.
districts?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I wondered is to the, you know, what would, so we've spent 3 years working on this and probably over the course of the 3 years, I'm going to guess collectively 20 to 25% of the board's time was focused on this, and that maybe if something would like if you wanted to get to something like form-based code, where do you find the time in the agenda?
Oh, no
to do that,
question.
right?
Yeah.
So it comes down to, you can do anything with the right consultant and enough funds to do it. None of this on any grand scale can be done in-house. I can tell you in 25 years ago, the planning division supported 4 boards and committees. We now support 9. There's still only 2 admin assistants, same as there was 25 years ago. Marcia, myself, and we've added 1 senior planner. I can tell you that there's no capacity to do anything on a grand scheme. And as far as form-based code, that's a very specific knowledge base, that there are some consulting firms that can help with that. My other concern with, especially at the comments made at town meeting, is there also needs to be some type of education piece on how consultants work with a community. Because for anybody to say that the planners at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council have some ulterior motive is, in my professional opinion, a form of slander. They work very hard for the 101 communities that they support. And so if that consultant wasn't good enough, what consultant will be good enough? And so that's a hard position to move forward from. Because
Well, Krista, or Elizabeth, I mean, we were told by, on the one hand, we were using this outside consultant that was opposing Boston ideas on us. On the other hand, we should have hired an outside consultant to do all this because we didn't have the in-house expertise. So
Because it has nothing to do with them.
Wait, but didn't the grant come from them?
All the consultants or have
Wait,
all
am
the
I right
food
that the grant
consultants.
came from them?
each of the regional planning agencies in the Commonwealth receive a certain amount of funds to provide local technical assistance that they divvy up among the communities that they support. So yes,
So yes, so the answer is yes. So that's different than an outside consultant, right? Because if it was our money and we had hired somebody, that's different.
no, it's all 101 communities in town that in the Metropolitan Area Planning Council submit requests for proposals for projects, for them to help. And they assist 101 cities and towns with different projects that they want to move forward with, because you're a member of that regional planning agency. We pay additional dues to our subregion to get their technical support and assistance at a rate that, there's some communities that would never be able to hire an actual private consultant to assist them. And this is, that's their job, is to assist these 101 cities and towns. They're not, it is your money, it is your funds. And you
Well-
go through a competitive process to, similar to other grants, to have them assist you. So they don't have some ulterior motive of they have a developer lined up for Crosby's Market.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying
people,
that it's
people were
different.
saying that. So if I
There's an
Right,
had a
implication.
people were
private
saying all sorts of
consultant-
things. Yeah.
There's an implication there too, which is to suggest that it's tainted because they were part of the funding source, and so that they must be promoting their own
Not
agenda.
tainted, it's their motivation would be, I think it is a different relationship that you have. I think it is a different relationship, and I'm
I
working as a
felt-
consultant for 20 years. I think that there's a different relationship. I do.
I felt comfortable evaluating the merits of the ideas encapsulated in the proposal that were, yes, developed by MAPC, but I did not feel like I was being snookered due to the fact that they had helped fund the initiative. So I think, I think a lot of people grabbed onto that line of thinking and had a visceral reaction to the overall proposal. I see other hands. Nathan, I see your hand up. Let me pause though. We've had some members of the public that have had their hands up for a while. So Dawn, you were the first one to raise your hand. Did you have a comment?
Isn't this board discussion first?
Well, we've been discussing, but by all means, if you've got a further comment, Nathan, weigh in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, the MAPC thing, again, this is a red herring. It wouldn't matter who was doing the consulting there. And anybody who was raising the issue of us this coming year doing any sort of traffic studies or anything else that we end up spending money on, we're just gonna get whacked twice if we do that. They're gonna say, we wasted money doing these studies, and that these studies are tainted to side with what outcome we wanted. We already know where that's going to go. I don't think we should do it. It was a red herring to begin with. We know why there was opposition to it. We need to stop dancing around that and just address that issue directly.
Okay. Thank you. Dawn, if you're still with us.
Yes, Burton, thank you. First up, my name is Don Kopka. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee. And I sent a letter to the board about Article 33, and I won't repeat myself there. My comment really is on Article 32, but I will just say that I don't believe that the opposition to 33 is quite as ensconced as you might think from comments I'm hearing here. There are a lot of members of the public who would love to see this rezoned and would love to have another bite at the apple. And in fact, there are a lot who would appreciate seeing some affordable housing built in the area. So, but regarding 33, I just wanted to bring 32 rather. I just wanted to bring to your attention, in case all members of the board aren't aware, I actually spent some time working for a formula retail business. And a standard business practice is to put an exclusivity clause in your lease, which means that the landlord in leasing to you agrees not to lease to anybody else who, well, for example, in Starbucks lease, anybody who serves coffee or sells whole or ground beans of coffee. And they will say, so for that landlord, the owner, they agree not to let a local coffee shop into any of their properties within a certain number of miles radius. And if they already have, say, a homegrown shop, they agree that they won't renew that lease for that tenant. And this is part of the Malling of America. This is a big force behind it. And having been a part of that, I wanted to make sure that the planning board's aware. If there's a way through zoning that we could eliminate exclusivity clauses, I would be wholly supportive of having more formula retail, but absent that, it is very anti-competitive and would be quite bad for America. I mean, for Concord, I was really glad that we agreed to limit the number of formula retail to 12 in that district. And I would urge you to consider in the future this implication of formula retail and perhaps even bringing that number down as we go forward. Thank you for the chance to comment.
Thank you, John. And on that, with respect to Article 32, I know that got changed, and that was we weren't able to really respond cogently to that as a board at town meeting. And so I don't think we really got across why we went with 12 instead of 14. In fact, I think some people thought we were purposely trying to elbow out some room for formula businesses. But going to this question about exclusivity as well, the reason for that is there's nationally quite a bit of case law around formula businesses. There is some case law in Massachusetts, and the issue that arises is that under the Dormant Commerce Clause of the Constitution, you cannot essentially impede the ability of businesses that are engaged in interstate commerce and treat them differently from local businesses. And that engaged in interstate commerce is pretty broadly interpreted, especially through a lot of the civil rights cases to stop segregation. So when there is real concern that the more you extend those protections around exclusions on formula businesses, you run into constitutional issues. And in this case in particular, there's a great treatise that I read by Mark Bobrowski, a local attorney but an expert nationally on these issues, that talks about what are the things that will get you into per se illegality or unconstitutionality. And one of the things is if you restrict formula businesses town-wide, and here we are getting to our third commercial district, we were concerned that we didn't want to make it too inflexible because we wanted to maintain the ability for some formula businesses to come into town to preserve and protect our formula business bylaw from being overturned from judicial scrutiny. It was lowered to 12. I doubt that would be the factor that would get it tossed as opposed to extending it to the Thoreau Depot, which might be a bigger factor. But that was one of the reasons. I would doubt it would be I think it would be imprudent to try to make that lower. It also is as opposed as in terms of prohibiting or restricting what people can put in their leases. You probably will run into some of the same constitutional issues as not being able to dictate what can be in people's contracts. In terms of the anti-competitive piece, you'd be amazed what is, or maybe you're an expert on this, in fact, what is allowed and was not allowed through contracts in terms of restricting competition, as long as it's two parties that enter into it at arm's length. With respect to competition issues. So that might be fraught with some of the same concerns or add on to the concerns that we had, which led us to propose the cap of 14 above instead of 12, which was the exact same thing we'd done in West Concord and Concord Center. But thank you for that comment. Sue Richardson, I see your hand up.
Coming. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for calling on me. And
get your address.
260 Elsinore Street, Concord. Couple things. One, I want to genuinely, and I hope you'll receive this, thank all of you for however many of those 3 years of work that you put in. That's a lot of brain power and a lot of effort and a lot of working together. And I really, really, really appreciate that. And I feel like when something doesn't pass, it's hard to think, oh, people really appreciated that. But I just want to say that and I think a lot of people do appreciate all that work that you did, including the staff, the planning staff of the town. I want to say something. I actually abstained at town meeting because I wanted to vote for it and I couldn't. So I was very strong. I was pulled in both directions. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that. Like, I feel like I should have done something, but I abstained, couldn't vote for it, couldn't vote against it. And I want something to happen. I do want there to be development. And I want to just share something with you. I think from a process perspective, like Burton, as you're talking, all that technical information that you have is so important. And I look at things more from a process perspective. A lot of times it's a professional thing for me. And I want, if I may say, as I'm listening tonight, I don't blame you for being upset that it didn't pass, but I'm concerned that through this whole process, maybe there's a little bit of distancing you're feeling with the town, with the people who live in the town, like if they're feeling like a little bit of the enemy. And I'm concerned about that because I just think, I think that must stink for you as I think that's hard to deal with, but also I don't think that's the way through here. I don't think we'll get to passing something if it doesn't come from a place of partnership. And there may be people who are putting stuff out there that is inaccurate, but that comes from somewhere. And how do we, and I blame the pandemic, and I don't blame it on everything on that, but I think these Zoom conversations are hard. I think it's easy to feel disconnected. And I think what you were trying to do was a heavy lift to begin with, and then trying to connect with people in these circumstances is wildly difficult. But I'm just kind of asking you to take a step back and think, has my mindset gotten to the point where I think these folks are our enemy? And what can I do about that? Because I just don't think it'll go well, if that makes sense. And I'm saying all this thinking everyone's going to think I'm bananas, but someone nodded. I don't think Kristen thinks I'm bananas for a second. But
I don't think you're bananas.
I don't think you're bananas, Sue. I think they're wise words.
Yeah. So just, I'm for you. I'm with you, and I get it. But and I guess in light of that, the other thing I've wondered about is that West Concord Advisory Committee. You know, is there an analog that could help have it be a more community-based effort? So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. I think that's wise words to live by. If you're feeling, if what's you're picking up this evening is an us versus them sentiment, I will just tell you in my own personal view on this was, and it was interesting when we saw so much advocacy on one side. I didn't feel that it was my role as a member of the board to be an advocate. Is interesting, is maybe strange that sounds all the work we put into it in terms of lobbying. I viewed the role of the board as capturing what was the mission given to us by the long range plan, right, which was done through the process that is how we do long range plans, and to pick that up and to do that as best we could, right? And if at the end of the day the town says no, we don't like the way that long range plan has been crystallized into something, an actual step, then that's entirely up to the town. A lot of people, you would not believe the number of people that came up to me on the street, in Crosby's, on soccer game sidelines, the track meets, ski races, so many places to talk to me about this proposal. And a lot of times I said, listen, in a way, I'm kind of agnostic about it in terms of taking a position one way or the other, but this is the job that the long range plan and electing to be on the planning committee, that it's the job we've got to do. And I think that what we saw was, I wouldn't say it's an us versus them. But I do think that there is, as with almost every issue, large or small, that comes before the board, there's what can be the clash between the perceived townwide goals, which many people reached out and expressed support of some of the things that were the townwide goals here, versus the more local neighborhood interests. And it is always easier to motivate people who are directly affected rather than people who are affected more in the abstract, I think. And it very well may be that those neighborhood interests should carry the weight. I mean, that's why we send notices to abutters on the smaller issues. Kate, yes, you've got your hand up.
I think, Burton, what you just said was we have the long range plan, and now this proposal is crystallizing the long range plan, the goals of the plan. And I just want to explain that my thought that we should come up with specific housing goals, numbers of units was like is what I was thinking is the next step to crystallizing those goals, because I think people can get behind something that has a specific number to it. Like, this is what we're doing to address this issue. There's going to be an impact, but we all agree it's worth it. Versus something that is just like no one knows. Like, we could build as much affordable housing as we could build affordable housing every square foot, on Emerson Park, everything, and you still wouldn't be addressing the problem. So I think a lot of what I heard from people was they wanted to get their arms around like more data. Like, if we're addressing the affordable housing issue or forget affordable housing, like diverse housing, by building 100 units, okay, let's just assume we're going to do 100, then we can say, what's the impact on our schools? What's the impact on traffic? What's the impact on our climate change goals? Because if you add 100 people, like using 100, however much electricity they use, that is like going to impact our climate change goals. And then we can do those kinds of assessments, even if it's just like a case study, like say we did add that number of housing at this location. So I just wanted to kind of use that as a way of like trying to like bring this stuff down to earth for people. And as you know, after I think there's a lot of confusion about whether the town has those goals, and I certainly don't think that they do. The housing production plan does not have those goals. The housing production plan is about 40B. So I guess I'm kind of sorry that suggestion, that's how I would suggest if we go forward and we want to build more support. I think having that and having it would really help. It's basically the next step coming out of the long range plan to me. Because like if you had like you could have like 100 families come to you and say, I really want a $900,000 house in Concord, and it's like, well, yeah, everyone does, but we don't have that. But it's okay, what are we going to do? So I think that is worth it. That's it.
Creating a scenario on an assumption that a private developer would come in and build, and what those specific numbers would look like with respect to cost to town, number of units that would be created. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that, so the long range plan says we need more diverse housing. We need more affordable housing with a big A. We need more affordable housing with a little a. Mm-hmm. How much do we need? We're going to try to build this much. Then if we're doing something like rezoning through a business district, we can say, wow, if our goal was 200 units, we would say, wow, like 95, this gets us halfway to our goal. So these are 95 units that don't have to be built somewhere else. Instead of just saying like, oh, wow, 95, that's huge. That's so much more than zero.
Do you think that makes sense in the context of, I think if we looked at if we had passed this zoning, what's the likelihood that you would have seen 95 units actually constructed? It might give people a false sense of the efficacy of what we were doing. It is speculative what we were doing, and I think you're looking for something more concrete. But like we were talking about, if we built out 36 units on Thoreau Street, but as I hope I was able to demonstrate, I know I was really rushed. It's virtually, even with this zoning, impossible to build on most of the lots on Thoreau. So you wouldn't get 36 units of housing there. Would Stop and Shop is likely holding onto the Crosby's parcel, not as a money-making venture, but because they want to box out, Whole Foods from coming in. So they keep it open. They keep leasing it to Crosby's. Are they ever going to actually play a game? It's also speculative that I think that that coming forward and saying, well, the town needs to create X number of units of affordable housing, this would accomplish that. I think might be, some people might think we're overselling it. that makes sense. Because we're just creating the ground rules. We're not building projects.
It doesn't make sense to me because like that's the whole reason for advocating for it. I think that you guys are all advocating for it because it could create affordable housing. But now you're saying to me, it's not actually going to create anything.
No, I'm saying I don't think I want to promise to anybody any particular numbers. The phrasing I used at town meeting was I was very thoughtful. I put a lot of thought into it. Whether you think I was thoughtful or not is another thing. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, that our goal was to make it more likely that in the future we'd see more housing built in the district. But I wouldn't go forward and say this will result in 20 units of affordable housing being built, because I would honestly, we had this sort of full build out scenario, that the numbers that we got from the planner, but I think that that's the scenario 50 years down the road if things aren't changed 10 more times between now and the end of this century.
Okay, but fair enough. But like, even if we had the goal, like whether what we're doing is speculative or not, I mean, like we would say we do get, people were scared of having it built out in 95. So instead of being scared, we can say, wow, but look, this gets us halfway to the goal. So I guess maybe it's.
I wonder if it was actually sort of putting some of those numbers out there that made, putting some specific numbers in terms of what could be built that created some unnecessary fear, right?
Yes. It was those numbers and the affordable housing that drove the primary opposition.
Yeah, what Nate, you said before, you said, oh, we all know what this is really about, but I'm not sure what is it really about? I don't know.
The primary opposition was driven by the fear that a large set of smaller little a and big A affordable housing would go there and would adversely impact their own home's value. That was it. They're worried about the square footage cost, valuations of their homes. They know that's why all those questions that they kept asking and they kept bringing up in that green sheet, even that green sheet made us.
I didn't see the green sheet. I'm sorry.
Values are at market rate currently. It was pretty transparent, and they said almost as much at several meetings.
Wait, could I interrupt for a sec? Because one, Burton is probably trying to wrap up his second to last meeting at a reasonable time. Two, I want to hear Sue. But three, Kate, it sounded like, to the original point of this has been a really good discussion. It did sound like you wanted to at least give some thought to how you might want to proceed. Kate, you mentioned that you had been approached by a potential partnership with the FinCom maybe. So how do you think you might partner going forward to come up with a new and different proposal?
The two members who approached me were specifically concerned about the fiscal impact of the town from the potential build out that we were incentivizing. So it would just be a matter of looking at I don't want to put words in their mouth, but there was some discussion about putting money towards studying impact on sewer system, water system, schools, and I don't know how straightforward just some kind of impact assessment like that would be, but I don't think it's about this project. And in my mind, it would be about, like, if the town has goals to build this in really important housing, then it would just kind of go along with that. And then that would, wherever the housing ended up coming up, that assessment would be relevant. It's not just about the road depot in my mind. But the folks that from the FinCom were kind of interested in, I suggested that a scope could be written of like what they wanted to look at, because I don't know how much it would cost or if it would be considered worth it.
Linda.
If the finance committee is concerned about the expenses to the town, that they might want to consider how many mansionization projects are adding to our demand for more power, energy, and need for improvements to the sewers and the water
Linda,
system. And I
that-
don't hear that. I'm sorry, but I
Sorry.
really have to say that I
Okay.
think that's a red herring because, you know, there clearly is a need to build out infrastructure, but I don't think this particular project, you know, that's the tail wagging the dog, in my opinion. So, that.
Also
But,
part of-
but Linda,
a
this
comment.
like building out through a depot doesn't do anything to mansionization. Like you would have just as much mansionization.
Yeah,
they're
well,
two-
if they are
right?
concerned about that, then they should be concerned about mansionization as well. And I don't see the finance committee taking up that issue because the bigger the mansion, the more taxes are paid. And the same with the Thoreau district. If you have more value, you're going to have more property taxes coming.
I've been looking at mansionization for a couple of years. I can't figure out what to do about it, but
It's,
I don't wanna
it's
put
a
words
supply
in
and
Linda's
demand
mouth, but-
issue that we were trying to address with supply.
but
But-
how like they're two completely different markets.
So one thing I know that's a big discussion, but I would note some of those things that I think that they're looking for in terms of impact on to the town, impact to septic, so forth. It may sound an awful lot like the criteria for a site plan review, right? Because that is the criteria for a site plan review. So, but listen, there's one thing I've learned about being on the planning board now for 5.5 years is it's hard to understand how all those different, what processes are required when and what happens. I think a lot of people, honestly, I mean, I had people after the meeting coming, you know, after the fact saying, wow, I heard they were going to build a 90-unit apartment building across from Crosby's. I mean, and it got distilled down to that for a lot of people, not understanding that we were changing the rules, and before anything would be built, there would be a site plan review that would look at specifically, because we've all looked at these, so we know these criteria, looked at the cost impact to the town, looked at traffic, looked at the whether there's sewer capacity, et cetera. Sue, you've had your hand, Sue Felshen, you've had your hand up raised very patiently.
No worries. I have hardly anything to say though, so I hope you didn't get your hopes up. First of all, you, or assuming the select board moves forward by that time, we can remove this article next year because it was the planning board's article. And second, I wanted to report before I forget on it about something I heard at town meeting, which is on the subject of MAPC, which is someone at the microphone, and I don't know who it is, commented about how they didn't like that the something corporation was advising the town. So the level of misunderstanding of what MAPC is, at least for one person, was so much that they thought that we were being told what to do by some company that probably wanted to build housing rather than it was a government organization, just like the planning board is. That's just one person, but I thought I would throw that in there. And Burton, if you had been on speed, you couldn't have talked any faster. So I don't know how to get all the information out there, but there it is.
Well, I regret that I spoke so quickly. I had to beg.
But you
and
had so
borrow.
much to say. What were you going to do?
You know, I was originally given 7 minutes. I got it. I went through probably 34, 35 revisions to cut it down from the 20 minutes discussion that we had at the public hearing. And the town moderator generously gave me 8.5. I think I probably still ran over by about 14 or 15 seconds. I don't know. I wasn't watching, but I had to go quick, unfortunately.
Yep.
And who knows if that was the best approach. It didn't win the day. Does anybody else have any further comments? If not, maybe we can bring up some closure to this. It sounds like there, actually, Sue, Sue Felshen, I was going to ask you a question. I didn't quite understand. You were saying if the select board moved the article, it could happen again next year?
No, so it's under the State Zoning Act.
Yeah.
Under Section 5.
Yeah.
And I can read it to you. No proposed zoning ordinance or bylaw which has been unfavorably acted upon by a city council or town meeting shall be considered by the city council or town meeting within 2 years after the date of such unfavorable action, unless the adoption of such proposed ordinance or bylaw is recommended in the final report of the planning board.
That seems circular.
Well, what it means in a nutshell is that any planning board can move forward with any zoning bylaw so long as that is their affirmative action, is their recommendation to town meeting.
So that would only really impact proposed zoning changes that were petitions.
Or towns or
Generally.
cities that have different structures, governmental structure.
Interesting.
So there are still a few communities where planning boards are elected, and there's still a few communities where planning boards are sued by their select boards and vice versa. And so I imagine there could be a select board zoning amendment that's not recommended by a planning board. But ultimately, if there is any zoning bylaw amendment that has a recommendation to town meeting for affirmative action can come back, whether it was unfavorably acted upon or not.
I remember this coming up in the past when there were citizens petition articles that failed and weren't allowed back for 2 years.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, that's interesting. So it had been conveyed differently to me, and I didn't bother to go look up the law. So that's good to know. It could come back next year. So Elizabeth, it sounded like you were wanting to get a sense of the board as to whether they would want to keep this on the agenda for items to be considered over the next year. Is that more, and if we at this early juncture wanted to take a different approach?
So based on the conversation tonight, I think there needs to be additional conversation on the direction to move forward. And I will keep this on the agenda. Your meeting agenda for the 24th is fairly full. But starting in your meeting in June, you'll start reviewing your goals and projects for the next fiscal year. So I think that's where it'll stay on there, and the board can figure out what direction to move forward.
All right. Okay, then I think that brings us to minutes.
I'm gonna apologize. It has been very challenging with
I know.
Nancy gone,
I can imagine.
and but I can say that we do have a new administrative assistant starting on May 23rd. So that's a good thing. But I do think that our senior planner, Heather Gill, baby number 2 is not going to wait till July 4th, I don't think. So things are still kind of in flux in the planning division, but I will at least have, I might not have all 3 sets of minutes done by your next meeting, but I will have at least the April minutes done for you for your next meeting.
Great, thanks. And I would say, based upon bizarrely a review I did late one night in the past week of how many boards have their minutes posted, I think we're doing awfully well compared to most. In terms of
every
not
board and
lagging.
committee in the planning division is doing absolutely amazing. So
Yeah, I was surprised at the number of boards that haven't posted minutes in over a year. So, okay, so then I think that with that, if we're not voting on any minutes, that takes us to any liaison or public comments. Those are not on the administrative items listed, but they normally are. So I'm imagining there are no liaison comments because there probably weren't any meetings between town meeting and here. And does anybody have anything to update us on? I would make a general comment while I am, I feel like this is maybe the 3rd time I'm being a scold, but I've noticed that we haven't had a lot of liaison comments. Linda, I know you frequently do make them. I appreciate it. if people aren't making it to their their liaison meetings, or to the boards, or that they're assigned, if that's challenging with their schedule, I would recommend they get maybe ask somebody else to cover those. I know, like, I was wondering, it occurred to me that I have no idea what's going on in the West Concord Advisory Committee. And I don't know whether they're coming to our meetings and whether we are going to theirs, because I haven't heard anything about that for some time, as an example. Linda Escobedo, I see you turned your camera on. Was there anything you wanted to convey?
Yeah,
As our liaison?
yeah, thank you for letting me speak. I just want to thank all of you for the enormous amount of work that went into preparation for Article 33. And I know how difficult it is when you don't have success at town meeting, but it's pretty impressive to hear the depth and breadth of sort of the post-meeting assessment that you're doing on Article 33. And I've got to give all of you credit for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Any other public comment? We have a number of people here this evening. We've heard from a number as well.
No, but I will take the opportunity. So the board will elect a new chair, vice chair, and clerk at your first meeting in June. Nathan is currently, as vice chair, would be acting chair until that vote takes place. But the one, as far as liaison, Burton's currently the board's liaison to the Community Preservation Committee, with a term ending in May 31st of 2024. So it's the board will have to have a conversation, and I'll check with the town clerk. I believe the board can nominate whoever they wish to be your representative. So Burton, I don't know if it was your intention to, with your term expiring, to go off the CPC as well and have a new board member.
To be honest, this is the first I'm hearing that they're not coterminous. So
For some reason they aren't, and I think they should be.
Yeah, so do I. I think it's very important that somebody from planning be involved. I would love to stay on CPC, but that would have to be in the future as a select board appointee if I did that. Yeah, I think it needs to be somebody on the planning board.
So that is something that you may want to submit a green card for, because they do have at least one open seat as of May 31st, the select board. So I will speak to the town manager's office and the town clerk about having the planning board's representative term coincide with somebody's term, and how we can make that fit. But something for the board members to think about, because you will need to appoint somebody as your representative at your first meeting in June to the CPC, which is one of the more heavy lift committees that requires attendance.
Yeah, I would plug for that, guys. It is a lot of work. In November and December, you're meeting weekly, but during the summer, much more infrequently. But consider it to be about 50% of the work that or time spent that you would spend on the planning board, which sounds like a lot, but it is an awesome experience. And I've learned so much about Concord and what's going on in Concord, and gotten to literally, crawl through the places you'll never see as a regular Concord citizen. The highlights being going and up and looking at the clock in the top of the UU Church, or crawling through the basement in the Arts Center there across from the, what is that, the down from the cheese shop, just all seeing the Paul Revere silver in the Masonic Temple, like so many cool things. And hikes around White Pond to look at different things, and then getting to unlike us just weighing in and saying yes or no, you get to actually put money towards things. I can go around town. My kids are up, often rolling their eyes and saying, hey, the committee I'm on funded those stairs at White Pond, or we funded that, or did those things. Give it some thought. There's almost no better way to be plugged into the town of Concord than being on the CPC. And it is much less stressful and much more enjoyable than planning. Anyway, that's my plug. Unless anybody else has any other public comments, I think we're done. Oh, yes, Mr. Bader.
Stephen Bader, 7 River Street. I just wanted to say, I know I've said to you, Burton, and to you, Kristen, my personal appreciation, but to the whole board, you guys have worked really hard and really dedicated. And I am another one like Linda Escobedo who appreciates the time and effort that you put into this. And if there's any help that the housing groups or can help with in pursuing this next year, I'd be happy and honored to be involved in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Stephen, on that note, I think that one of the comments you're hearing is getting more awareness of support that was out there across the town, different groups, and making that more visible and in front, so people, it might tell the story a little bit more of why we're doing what we were doing. So thank you very much for that offer to help.
Thank you.
All right. Going once, going twice. We'll all see you in person on unless something dramatic happens with our numbers, we'll see you in person on the 24th. Have a good evening. Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.